Hi, Julian here from PopcornFX. In this video I will show you the benchmark mode of the Vector-Field viewer in PopcornFX 2.6. The benchmark mode allows you to preview how much it will cost for the Popcorn runtime to sample a specific vector field during the simulation. So to enable benchmark mode, you can either click on this little hourglass icon in the viewport toolbar, or click on the same hourglass icon in the Asset Details panel. When you hit that icon, whenever you hover the vector field, you will see here a number of cycles per query which are being measured, and this is basically going to call the simulation code to sample the vector field under your mouse cursor, and it will measure how long it takes to do that sampling and display that cost. So the number of cycles per query isn't a really useful value, at least not as much as, say, milliseconds, where you can have a better idea of how much it costs with respect to an entire frame of your game. But as this shows the cost for one particle, using milliseconds wouldn't be really useful, and also it would vary a lot from CPU to CPU. So this is the actual cycles cost, which can seem a little bit abstract if you're not a developer, but it will at least give you a relative idea of how that cost varies when you change different options. So for example, here, when I hover this vector field, I'm in trilinear mode. It costs 80 cycles per query. Yeah, trilinear and quadrilinear are basically the same thing, because the vector field isn't animated. So when I switch to point, it will drop to 30 cycles per query. So this already gives you a pretty good idea of the performance difference, which is more than half the cost when you switch to point. So in this case, switching to point doesn't visibly degrade the shape of the vector field, even though trilinear has slightly better curves. So if you want to divide the cost of sampling the field by more than 2, just switch to point, and that will do the trick. Other things that affect this cost will also be things like the vector format which the vector field is stored in. So here I'm in FP16 mode. If I switch to U8SN, which will divide the size, the memory footprint, by 2, it will also slightly increase the cost. So now I'm at 35 instead of 30 cycles per query. And in trilinear, I'm at 96 instead of, I believe it was around 80 or something. Yeah, 83. And similarly, if you switch to FP32, you'll have a small difference. Yeah, 28 instead of 30 for FP16 and 35 for U8SN. So these costs will also vary from CPU to CPU. The main idea here is that you can test the clamping modes, the filter modes, the size of the vector field, other things, and see how it affects the runtime sampling cost. One thing that will massively impact the performance is the vector field resolution, whether or not it's a power of 2. The actual resolution isn't affecting it that bad. For example, if I export this vector field as a 16 by 16, or let's even say 8 by 8 to have something really extreme. So if I re-export it as an 8 by 8 field, you will see that the cost difference isn't that great. So here I'm still at 30. It's pretty much the same. However, if I export that with a non-power of 2 size, so let's say instead of 64 I export it as 63, first you'll see that I have a warning here saying that the runtime sampling performance and quality will be degraded. So if I open that 63 by 63 field, here it says not a power of 2, and it tells me again that the performance will be degraded. And if I enable the benchmark mode, now it's 110 cycles per query instead of, I believe it was at around 80. And if I go to point mode, it's at 38 instead of 30. So this is by far what affects the most the sampling performance. So make sure you always use power of 2 vector fields. Another thing that will affect the runtime sampling performance is which CPU you are using, or which CPU the simulation is running on. So to preview that, you can click this wrench icon, which will open the CPU settings of the editor, where you can override your current CPU features, where you can degrade them and emulate older CPUs. So here we have a list of presets which you can use, or you can just hit custom, and when you unroll the CPU features advanced category, you have access to different CPU flags that you can disable. So here, let's say I remove all these. We were at 83 cycles per query, and now I'm at 112 cycles per query, because this is an FP16, so 16 bits float vector field, and I disabled the hardware support for FP16. So this wraps up this video. Thanks for watching.